Hi,
Hi.
welcome to Found with Trish and Sherri, the podcast. And today we are going to be talking to Trish about her story. Last episode we talked about my story. Today we're going to talk about Trish's stories. After years of swapping experiences between ourselves, we're ready to invite you into the conversation. Please like and save so you don't miss anything in the future. So Trish, talk to me about your childhood, about being adopted, about all things adoption. Where would you start? When were you born? Where were you?
Well, I was at an adoption agency and I was a few months old. And my mom and dad had been told that it would be a long wait for a baby. And it was not. So they drove over one day. And as my mom was parking the car, my dad walked in, saw me, and said, "We'll take her." And my mom said it was a good thing that she liked me because my dad was already packing me up to go home. So that's where it started. And my mom was an elementary school librarian, and my dad was a finance guy. And I grew up in the same small town that you did. We met when we were 2 when you moved to town.
Up
And
in
ever
North
since
Florida?
then, we have been good friends and been the people we talk to about our adoption feelings, experiences, etc. While as we talked in yours about where we grew up, did have an inordinate amount of adopted kids our age, it seemed like you were really the only person I ever felt comfortable talking about. I didn't talk about it too much with my parents or anybody else. I think back then it was a little more hush hush, and everybody wanted you to be part of, their biological family to make it seem like you weren't adopted. Like for some reason there was something wrong with it or something. But luckily we don't have those same type of things today. And I'm an adoptive mom myself, and my husband and I adopted our daughter back in 2008. And oddly enough, Sherri and her family were the first people to see her and meet her in the United States. My
Even
friend Linda
before her grandmother.
yep, my friend Linda had come and picked us up at the airport. And then we went to the hotel. And after we got a little bit of sleep, then you and your family came. And I thought that was interesting because it was before anybody.
The baby here
My
was
family,
everywhere.
yeah,
Yeah.
you and Linda and everybody. And so that was really sweet. But um, I had thought about looking for my family in college a few times. I had illness that would not go away and didn't have any answers for. And I thought, well, at least if I have health information, maybe somebody would know. But it was prohibitively expensive. And at that time, I really didn't want to look. I had never really wanted to look. I thought, well, they have their own lives. They probably have their own families. They probably don't want me busting in on them. And, because it was such a shame back then. And I thought they probably haven't told anybody and aren't.
And we were completely different in that
Yes.
regard. I
Yes.
always wanted to know. I was always going to find them. And Trish was like, nah,
Yeah. I don't care. Whatever.
yeah.
But surprisingly, and Sherri had looked on and off through the years as well. And finally, in our 40s, Sherri called me up and said, "I'm doing the DNA test and you're going to do it with me." And I'm like, "No." And she's like, "Yes." And as we see, she won. And
Pretty persistent.
I'm
Yes.
telling you, one of the things I love about you. And so I put the DNA in, and after Sherri had found her birth mother and it had gone really well, I thought, well, okay. And I put it in to look. And it seemed to take quite a while. We used the DNA detectives from Facebook, and I had 2 of them working, one in Australia and one in Georgia, that were volunteers. And it took quite a while to find because I guess we didn't have really close information or anything to work from. And I had some information from the adoption agency. But finally, we thought we had found her, but I couldn't find a way to contact her that wasn't super direct. Like I could get a phone number or an address, but I didn't know who she was living with, or again, my reticence for upsetting people or not wanting to interfere or blow her cover or whatever you want to call it.
Because we had already gone through a little bit of that
We
with
had,
me. Yeah, we were getting pretty savvy at this.
yeah, and I just didn't want to um, cause trouble where trouble didn't need to be. So what I
Right.
ended up doing was we found what we thought was my birth grandmother. I had talked to an aunt who astonishingly lives across the river from me where I live now, which was
Right.
very weird because apparently I have a whole bunch of family there. And again, don't know them, but we'll get into
Well,
that.
that's not actually where you were born either.
It's not.
Right. That's
It's not.
interesting to me because I was born right where I live, the same city, and I moved away and then I moved back and I found my birth mother in the same city. You, however, were born several hours south
Away.
of where you live.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And then moved to the small town and then eventually settled here. And but I had talked to that aunt for, I guess, probably 2 hours the first time I talked to her, not knowing if she was the right person or anything like that. But we just got along so well, and she enjoyed talking to me and, trying to figure out who it might be or whatever. And, I'll do whatever I can to help you. And because I think her son had put in the DNA, and that's how we found her to talk to her. Well, the good thing is, eventually, when I finally did talk to my birth mother, she had told her, she knew that something had happened, and they got it worked out. But when I called my grandmother, I told her who I was and that I had was looking for family and doing my family tree and trying to find people. And we chit chatted for a little while. And at one point, once I was pretty sure it was her, I said, I am adopted, and here's when I was born. And I said, I see that you have X number of daughters, and I think, I would love to talk to this one. I think she may know something. And the tone of the conversation changed immediately. It was
Right.
like the air conditioner went down 20 degrees. Not in a bad way, but you could, everything just
Talking
tightened up.
away.
I could,
Yes.
and she kind of stopped for a minute and she's like, honey, I don't know that I can help you. And I thought, I found her.
You found her.
It just felt like I found her. I just, by the tone of her voice, and I can't get it exactly, but it was between yay and oh crap.
Well, and Trish and I have talked a lot about how when we were born, what the birth mothers must have been told, don't talk about it, and there was no DNA, and go on with your lives. And here they've not gotten away with it, but they've lived under this way of doing it for decades.
Under closed adoption, where they were told that they'd never be contacted, they would never know, and
yeah,
they went.
And so imagine all that time going by, and here's Trish saying, I want to speak to this daughter.
Yeah. Well, it took weeks. It was weeks, and we waited and we waited, and I'm like, she's not going to call me, and you're like, she'll call you, just give her some time.
The birth mother.
Like, okay.
Right.
Yes. And then
because the grandmother said, I'll give her the message, right?
Yes, I will give her your name and phone number. Okay. And that's what I can do for you. And I said, great, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And then we waited and waited and waited. And I just kept thinking, it's too long. It's too long. She's not excited like your birth mother was.
Right. It was a long time.
It was a long way. And of course, when you're doing this, every day feels like a year. So it was probably only a few weeks, but finally she did text me and basically said something along the lines of, you left information with my mom and you wanted to talk to me. So let's set up a time to talk. Okay. And it was a few more days. And then we finally talked. And when we got on the phone, I was just shaking, like that uncontrollable shaking, like a leaf that you just can't help. Don't know where it was coming from. My stomach was shaking. My hands were shaking. And I thought, for somebody who didn't want to find their birth family, this was pretty astonishing.
Right.
And we talked for a while. And at one point, I said, I, I just need to hear it. Who do you think you are to me? And she goes, you don't know? And I'm like, oh, I think I know, but I really need to hear it from you.
Right.
And that's when she says, I am your birth mother, but you will never, ever call me mom, mother, mom, nothing, ever. And I said, fair enough. I have one of those. And
Right.
that's mom, and I'm okay with that. So we stayed on a first name basis, and we met a few months later, maybe 6 months later. I don't remember exactly. It was a while. We met in person, and it was the wildest thing because where she's driving somewhere to go do something else and was coming through my town, and I went to meet her at Carrabba's, and I just spent the whole time going,
Right. You're
look,
looking for
wow.
yourself in
Yeah.
them.
And it's
Yes.
like,
Yes.
yeah, and I'm like, wow, this looks like her. That doesn't look like her. And it was just so
Because for
surreal.
me, I had 4 biological children. And for you, this was the very first time you had seen anybody in the world that you were biologically related to.
It was. And I can't quite describe the feeling, but it was very, very, it was electric and scary and happy and weirded out and terrified.
Yeah.
Um, I thought, God, what if she doesn't like me? What if she's disappointed? What if I'm not, what she expected? She doesn't like my personality. She doesn't like how I look. Whatever it is, she's going to
Didn't she
reject.
bring you something?
Yeah, she did. She's incredibly good, crafty. And
Like
she,
Trish,
yeah,
creative.
yeah. She is an amazing, amazing seamstress, and she had a handmade purse that looks I mean, it is beautiful, gorgeous, and she brought a little purse for my daughter too. And we took one picture. I was terrified to even ask for the picture,
Right.
but she did tell me that you can never contact anybody else in my family. You do have a half brother. He's married. You can't ever contact him. Um, and that was her conditions. And so I've had to go through that because I and this is always a thing that you and I have talked about. Does your right to know your family supersede your right to keep your parents secret?
Well, and I know that, like, with my biological dad, because we emailed back and forth, I think for a year and a half before I contacted my sisters, which he had asked me not to do. Um, and it was like that was the condition he put on having a relationship. And we've talked a lot about how we didn't ask to be here, and yet we were being dictated
From
to
birth. Yeah.
from birth, and how yes, from birth.
From
And
birth.
if we wanted these relationships, they were conditional
They were conditional.
with
And
my
I certainly,
biological dad and with your biological mom.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
and I accepted the condition because I did want to have, I liked her. I mean, I really liked her.
Yes.
She's in some ways so much like me. I see a lot of my personality in her, and she's kind of spunky and sparky, and she's got the blonde hair, and we just have so much in common. And we're both great spellers, readers, blah blah blah. It was just as we've gone along and gotten to know each other, it's like, oh, I have that too. She even walks in the little unusual kind of shuffly way I walk, I have been told. And it was interesting. It's been really great getting to know her, but she wasn't interested in a really close relationship, probably because she said she had a really hard time adjusting to having me and having to give me up, because apparently the story that we got, that they loved you so much and they knew they couldn't give you what
Yep.
what you needed, that they put you up for adoption, wasn't true. She did want me.
Correct.
Her
That was
mother
that
wanted
was
me.
yes, that was well, in my case, my biological mother desperately wanted me, but her mother, who was raising 5 teenagers as a single mom could not take on anymore and
Right.
did not want um, her to keep me. Yes.
Whereas in mine, my birth mother and her mother wanted to keep me. She was the oldest of the kids, and her dad absolutely refused. And the sad part is a few years later, he made himself no longer here, so we don't get
Mhm.
flagged.
Right.
And I think the amount of trauma that had to have caused to have been forced to give up her child because she didn't have the resources and didn't have a way to do it as a teenager. And then to have something like that happen from the person that said no, I just
Right.
can't imagine. So it took her, she said, quite a while to get kind of back on her emotional feet and get going. But she did, and she eventually got married, had my brother. He's married. I did look him up on Facebook, and you and I followed him for a while.
Girl, we did a lot of
Yeah,
stalking.
we did. And I was always surprised at how much when I looked at him, I saw myself more so even than my mom, I thought.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
but
and he has a child.
he has a child
So you have
about the same age
a
as my daughter.
nibbling, right?
So we talk about that. I know who his wife is, and I followed him for a while until he finally got rid of his Facebook. But it was interesting, and all I'll say is, as an aside, is be very, very careful what you put online, because people like us are going to look for it. And even if we're not being bad about it or want anything bad, it is astonishing what you can find
Right.
just by going to open Facebooks. Who's your family, who's your friends, how do you figure out, I figured out who several of my birth aunts were because of Facebook pages.
Yes. Same.
Yeah.
Same.
So
Yeah,
be careful what you put online if you don't want the world to see it.
exactly.
And you get a lot out of obituaries, and you get a lot out of there's a lot of things online.
Yes.
So, but I'm sure we'll talk about that at one point. But anyway, so I had that relationship with her, and we didn't talk a whole lot, but that's okay. It was kind of freaky for both of us. But the second time, maybe, I don't know, a year later ish, I don't remember the exact time period, but she was coming through town again, and she was going to meet me. We were going to meet at Cracker Barrel and have breakfast. Great. So I go up, and we end up sitting by the big windows, and we're talking, and we're ordering breakfast. Now, this is only the second time that we've met. So still kind of a stranger,
And this is
not,
not in a small town, y'all. This is
no,
not a small town.
it's a million plus.
Yeah.
So we had just gotten breakfast ordered, and I looked out the window, and I must have gotten a look on my face because I was like, uh-oh. And she goes, "What's wrong?" I said, that lady is my mom. She goes, "Oh, did you invite her?" I said, no,
Why
no.
would I do that?
I would
Right.
never spring her on you. That is not my style. I would definitely let you know.
Right.
And she's like, "Well, it's okay. I'll meet her." And I'm like, "Are you sure? I mean, we just, we're just getting this together." She's like, "No, no, no. I'm sure. I'm sure." So I go over. My mom's been sat down by now, like halfway across the restaurant. And I'm like, "Hi." And she looks at me like, "What are you doing here?" And I said, well, "It's during the week. It's not even the weekend.
Right.
So why in the world are you in Cracker
Here.
Barrel on a Tuesday or whatever it was?"
Right.
And I said, "Why are you here?" I told her I was meeting my birth mother. And
Right.
she goes, "Well, that was at lunch." And I said, "No, it's at breakfast." I said, "She's right over there. She says it's okay if you want to meet her." And my mom, the little Southern belle, goes, "I haven't fixed myself up." I said, "I don't
Sounds
think
so
she's
much like
gonna
my
care."
mom.
I
I
know.
don't have any lipstick on.
I'm like, "I don't think she's gonna care."
No,
The
at
funny
all.
part is she had skipped breakfast because she had to go have blood work done. And she's like, "Well, I'm out, so I'm gonna treat myself to Cracker Barrel." I was like, "Oh, it must have been supposed to have happened."
Right.
So we walked over.
Because I don't think that that would have ever happened if you had asked your biological mother
I
to
don't I
set
don't
that up.
know. but it truly was one of the best moments of my
Yes.
life. And
Yes.
they introduced, they were introduced to each other. They hugged each other. And it was the first time that my birth mother use the word daughter. And she said, "Thank you so much for taking care and raising my daughter." And still makes me teary now. And my mom says, "Thank you so much for, letting me raise your daughter." And it was just a memory I will never ever forget.
Yeah.
And it was so great. And I think it was so healing for both of them. To have that moment of actually getting to meet. And I'm sure they'd wondered about each other all that time.
Yes.
I oddly still have never asked. Well, my adoptive mom has said she was wondered, because you always, I guess, would wonder what they
Yes.
were like, but I don't think she ever had hopes of meeting her. And so we all sit down, and I might as well not have existed for the rest of the conversation.
Right.
They just chatted and asked questions and talked to each other, and I'm just like, hello, me, could somebody talk to me? But I'm really glad they got that time, because since then my adoptive mom has had a stroke, and my birth mother's moved even farther away, and I don't think it would be possible for them to have that same kind of moment
Right.
to know each other a little bit like they did.
Right.
My birth mother still never met any of my family besides my mom. And in some ways, it
Your
bothers.
daughter, your husband,
Yep.
any of them. Yes.
And hasn't asked. Now, she does ask how they're doing once in a while.
Right. Right.
But our relationship is pretty much between ourselves.
Yes.
Now, I had a different experience on my father's side.
Right.
And that was quite unusual. As you know, when we found who he was, we found a gravestone.
Now, wait a minute, because for both of our biological fathers, first we found people that we thought knew them or were them.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. Remember?
That's true. I actually had tried to get hold of his first wife, which I did, and she was so very sweet. Apparently, he had gotten married like the month after I was born. Obviously, not to my birth mother.
Did he know you existed?
Yes, he knew I existed. And apparently, when she told him she was pregnant, she had no idea what happened to him or his family until I showed up in my 40s.
Oh, wow.
Never talked again, never communicated, nothing. And she did know his parents, but it was just silence. So she was kind of surprised. I can tell you what happened to him if you want to know. But first we had to ask if it was one of two people that you and I and the DNA detectives had, and Ancestry had gotten it down to, that it might be these two.
Right.
And she says, "Well, I don't know who the other guy is, but that guy's your father."
Right.
And it turns out he had been a traveling rock musician the first half of his life, and a pretty successful artist, fine artist, the second part. And I went, well, that explained my personality right there.
Right.
I said, yep, that's pretty much
between the art and the rock. Yes.
Pretty
Trish never misses a concert where she can see Sting. Big Duran growing up. And
and The Cure and
we took art together. We took private art lessons together at Miss Haney's house.
Yeah. Yes, Miss Haney's house. And we were in that small group that would go for hours.
Yeah. And she had a pet raccoon. Was wild. I still want a raccoon as a pet to this day.
No, because of her, I never want a raccoon.
I love chaos. I love chaos.
No. I love my Shih Tzu, just incredibly sweet. But you have Diogi, so.
My crazy Pomeranian.
Oh, crazy Pomeranian. So I guess in a way you do have a raccoon.
I do have a raccoon. The kids call him the gargoyle.
Yes.
Yes.
But
so back to finding your dad.
When we did confirm who he was, I was, he'd passed away already, and it's like, well, there's an opportunity. My paperwork had said he was an only child. One of the
Oh, that paperwork.
oh, that paperwork. And
Right.
that was not the case. He had an older sister, and I think it was the one in Georgia, had found him, no, her, and said, "Well, I think I found your aunt. I don't have an aunt."
The person who was helping us
Who was
search,
helping us, yeah.
the person in Georgia is
And
one of the search helpers.
and apparently, it turns out I did have an aunt, and the DNA and all proved it. And they live in the same town you do.
Right.
Uh, it was her, and then she has a son who is pretty much our age because
Right.
she was the older sister.
Who is your first cousin?
Is my first cousin.
So these are the second and the third biological family members that you met.
And I drove down there and met them one day, and he is a pretty successful musician. And she was very artistic too. Wasn't particularly an artist, but I've seen some of her work, and I don't know why she didn't think she was any good. She was fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
But went down there and met them. And the first time I met them, he was really friendly, and I was so freaked out because I've never met anybody with my same gray eyes. And it was like, this is so wild. I can see the resemblance, and we looked alike.
Right.
But his mom was kind of standoffish, and she only stayed for like half of lunch, and she didn't ask me a lot of questions. And for a while there, she just didn't seem to want to talk to me or anything like that. And I thought, well, that's fine. And my cousin and I had a wonderful talk. We were there probably 2.5 hours. And later, when we met them again, it was probably 3 years later. We had been going down and meeting them for lunch, and I took my mom and my daughter, and everybody got to meet, and it was really, really nice. And I finally said, my aunt had said something about, when you showed up the first time, it was just incredible. I said, what do you mean? I said, you seemed like you didn't want anything to do with me. You didn't ask anything, and you weren't. She goes, honey, I was so freaked out. It was like your dad walked in, and he'd only been gone a few years.
Right.
Oh, it changed my perspective immediately.
Right.
I was like, oh, okay.
Right.
But she passed away about 1.5 years ago, but we had really gotten a good relationship. I got a lot of family history. Still talk to my cousin. He's really become a cousin. It was so sweet. The first year, he called me on National Adoption Day.
That's
Tell me
sweet.
Happy Adoption Day. And I thought, oh, that was so sweet. But he's just been wonderful, and he's still like a regular part of our lives now.
And he had known your dad, right? He knew his uncle
he grew
growing
up with
up.
my dad, yes.
Yes.
And knows all the it's not a happy story there. My dad had a lot of trauma and tragedy and difficulty.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And my cousin had asked me, how much do you want to know? And I'm like, everything, the good, the bad, everything. And so it's taken a few years, but slowly I'm getting a really good picture of what, and that's for another time.
And some of it has really rocked you. Some of it has really, I guess for both of us, there have been discoveries that were, that changed kind of how we thought. And I have always said that I just thought I was who I was because that's who I was. And I didn't give much credit to, oh, I'm musical because my family's musical, or I inherited this tendency or whatever. And we have also just had the liberty of, this is who we are because we created it. And I think finding these biological family members has really taken that away from us. And then we'll talk again in the future. But I'm so happy that we were, already established. We were more than 40
Yes.
years old, and we knew who we were. We had supportive family members. We had the time to do all of this and to meet these people. But it was not always easy. It was
No, it
not
was
always
not.
easy.
And my daughter had asked when we were doing it, because, Sherri's adopted, right? Yes. And you're adopted. Yes. Yes. Is dad adopted? No. Is Bridget adopted? My friend Bridget? No. And she goes, oh, that's too bad. It's like we were in the club, and I'm like, what a wonderful
Right.
view of it. But I'm like, no, not everybody's adopted, honey. And we had to have that conversation. She was quite little. She goes, well, when are we going to do my parents? And I said, when you're 18 or older. And I know that's controversial for a lot of people, that they really want to find their kids and they're scared something will happen. They won't get to meet them or whatever. But with a lot of the stuff that we found that was bad, and a lot of it's, again, in the book, but there was, addiction and jail and lots of ex-wives.
Heavy stuff.
Heavy
Yes.
stuff. And I feel like if I'd have found this when I was 16, it would have changed who I became.
I agree.
It would have been such a hard burden it's still difficult now, some of the things that I have found out about family history and abuse. And it just, as I learned more, watching abuse roll from generation to generation to generation, and tragedy roll down from generation to generation to generation.
Right.
It would have changed my expectations of myself and who I am. And in a way, it kind of has already.
Yes, I agree.
I still have trouble integrating that these two people make up who I am physically. I know biology. We've known biology, but sometimes it's like, how can I be related to this person? I have no idea what their raising and their life was like. But in some ways, that's good, because it did stop the generational
experiences of trauma that aren't necessarily built into our DNA.
Yes. Now, I've definitely found some medical stuff and things like that I'm thrilled to have. But it's been an experience. And I think you've had some of that too, where it's like, how much is me and how much is my biology and how much is my adoptive parents and growing up. And it's really just an amalgam. And one of my favorite things was my cousin and my aunt brought me some of my dad's artwork, which I have found many of his pieces online, and they're not inexpensive. There's one I'm looking at, I just can't afford, but it's so gorgeous. But they brought me a few and insisted I take them. I didn't want to, because I didn't want them to think I was after money or anything of value. My cousin was like, he was your father. He'd want you to have them.
Yeah.
Apparently one time before he passed, he had said, I really wished I'd had kids. And so it's like, okay, well, I guess toward the end of his life, maybe he would have softened up and changed. But so I had these pieces, and I brought one was flat packed, so you could see the artwork, the big artwork. And my husband looks at it and he goes, wow, that looks like something you'd do. And I said, it kind of does. And he goes, look, it's your colors. It literally matches your office exactly. Yeah, kind of does. And he goes, well, it's nice you wrote his name on it. What? He says, it's nice you wrote his name on it. I didn't write his name on it. What are you talking about? I went over, and looking through his eyes, I went, oh,
right.
That's my handwriting. Yeah. How could that have possibly happened?
That's the craziest part, is those little things that happen. It doesn't make any sense, but those little things that happen.
But somehow that was something that I guess got passed, because, so there've been a lot of things like that. The one thing I did kind of scoot over is we did have one really bad experience trying to contact my birth father's ex-wives. One of them, I sent the same kind of message that we'd used the same message to contact everybody because it was so simple.
We'd worked it out.
We worked it out, and I sent it to her with, I'm looking for biological family, blah, blah, and your name has come up and I thought you might could help me out. And basically she threatened to put a restraining order on me and never ever contact me again.
Like,
Okay.
okay.
It's like, that's a dead
Message
end.
received. Yeah.
But yeah, that was kind of, and I don't know if he's had any other wives or anything that I found, but my cousin has been surprised. He's like, oh, I didn't know he was married then, and I didn't know he was married then.
Right.
And then I guess later on, years after we had done this and done the book, and I did assure everybody when I wrote the book and I ran it past them, I said, I did not do this to write a book.
Right.
But it has turned out, one, I write books, and two, it was so life-changing for both of us that it's like we think other people might want to know using today's tools. You don't have to have an in-between person. You don't have to go through your
Right.
adoption agency. You don't have to get all the permissions. You can really do it yourself. If you've got a third cousin with a DNA in there, you can track it. So there are no secrets anymore.
And I really thought that for us and in our situations, it was nice for us to have some control in how it rolled out, because we had not had control or a say-so in anything regarding these things that had happened in our lifetimes.
The other
And
thing
finally, we did.
The other thing that I think was really key, and I know it's key for you too, was having somebody go through it with us, that we had each other and we could call, because we'd be going freaking out about something. And I know both your husband and mine would go, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't get it. Call Trish, call Sherri. And so when the book came out, my husband was like, I'm not in this very much. And I'm like, yeah. I said, both of you kept saying, call the other. So, but it was really good, because if I could say, you know, this is bothering me or that's bothering me, even if it wasn't the same emotions you were having, I think you understood it in a way that somebody who wasn't adopted wouldn't.
Right. And then we were able to take that acquired knowledge and help other people as they went through the process. And I just got some confirmation yesterday that some of those people are going to come on for interviews. So super excited about that.
Yeah, I was really surprised at how many people, when we put up that the book was coming out, or that we were working on it and things that, and even that we were finding people. Yours was a lot more public than mine. I was scared to put it out for fear that people would go looking for her or something would happen or whatever. But so many people contacted us that I don't think either one of us realized that many people were adopted and that many people were interested. Plus, oh, you used Ancestry? I found somebody through Ancestry. I want to do this. And I think putting those stories in was also very cathartic to see that it was the same experience. It's different. Everybody's is different, but it was a lot of the same kind of the fear of waiting, the fear of talking. How am I going to navigate this? What tools do I use? What's the legal, moral, ethical question?
What's the best way to approach? Well, and after that, how many stories, it just never occurred to me, how many stories weren't necessarily adoption related, because I had a friend who contacted and said, you know, we had an egg donor to have my son. I'm curious whether I should look or not. I don't know how my husband feels. My husband's sister popped up. We'll talk about that on another. Actually, we're going to do an interview with her. Popped up, and it wasn't an adoption again. And there are just so many situations where DNA and things come up where we meet these biological family members that either we wouldn't have in the past, and now we do.
Well, speaking of sisters, that was one thing that happened later, was after the book had been out and things had kind of calmed down, and we were very, very blessed to get such a good reception for the book, and so many nice reviews and things like that, that it was really a joy to get it finally finished. It was rough writing, but it was good to get it done. And so years go by, everything kind of is calm. We're not thinking much about it. You know, we're going on with our regular lives. And all of a sudden I get a ping, and it's, you have a DNA match. I do. I'm thinking, oh, it's a great uncle, something or something.
Right. Second
And
cousins.
yeah,
Yeah.
because you get those a lot on
A lot.
Ancestry,
Yeah.
where, it's your second cousin 46 times removed. Do you want to be friends? No,
Right. Right.
too far. This one put me in the opposite seat of going, oh, that's a big match. So I called you immediately and I'm like, this is saying half sister. Now what do? I've never been on this side of it going, oh
Right.
gosh, what does she want? What is she going to be like? How's she going to feel about it, etc. But they were just absolutely lovely. And she was so laid back and cool about everything and just happy to find me. And
She's
um,
on your dad's side.
on my dad's side.
Right.
So when I tell you truthfully that Papa was a Rolling Stone, he really was, because she's in a state that he never lived in, and it's quite far from our state. So
Right.
we figured he probably was on tour somewhere, and it was the 70s.
Right.
And she ended up she was born to her birth mother, but ended up being adopted by a couple when she was 4 or 5 years old. No one's hers to tell. But it was very interesting. I'm like, well, how much do you want to know? She says, well, my mother would never give me my birth father's name. And I said, well, what's your mom like? And we kind of put two and two together and
Right.
said, I don't know how much of a relationship was there or not, but I can tell you what he was like. And we actually met several months later, got her whole family. She has a son, and she and her husband have 2 daughters, and they were cousins and all this. And so we went up and met them in Georgia at a Christmas event and spent the whole day with them and the next morning. And it was awesome. My daughter had tons of new cousins, and they were literally together the whole time we were there. And I've never had a biological sibling. I've never had any kind of sibling ever. And so it was very weird to say, I have a sister.
Because Trish grew up in your home. Growing up, you were an only child.
I was an only child.
Yes.
So the idea that I have a half sister and a half brother was just crazy. And as we've said, the brother I couldn't get to know, but to have my sister and her family be so open-armed about it, and us look at each other and compare each other. And there was a huge hug when we first met, and it was just wonderful. And we're hoping to be able to get back together this year during the holidays. And I love it. It's been a wonderful thing to have had happen.
Yes. How far away are they?
Tennessee.
Yeah. Near North Florida. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that's been a really big blessing, that not everybody turned out to be, talkable or reachable. And I certainly didn't get welcomed with open arms into big families. But the ones I have been given the open arms to have been quite a blessing. And I found some interesting things in my DNA that I couldn't figure out before. There would be like English, Native American.
Right.
What?
Right.
And I kept going, I can't figure out where this comes from. And you and I had scoured all the stuff you could find, all the old censuses and all that kind of stuff. And it kept coming up white. And I'm like, where in the world does this come from? Well, once I found my aunt on my dad's side, she goes, oh, that's a grandmother. I'm like, that's a grandmother? And she goes, yeah, it wasn't legal for them to be married. Big issues with, interracial marriage at the time. But your grandfather was pretty spunky and pretty much told the census person to write down white and leave him alone. And since then, I guess she was listed always. And I've seen pictures and everything. And I was like, I obviously didn't get any of the, the looks. I'm so pale, but I've seen beautiful pictures of her, and just finding those kind of weird things that we had found. And it's like, how did this fit in? And why why is there somebody here, and how do I have family in Ohio from
Right.
this far? And getting all those kind of answers was kind of neat, because now I feel like I have roots. I had roots with my adoptive family, but it's just not the same.
Right.
It's never going to be the same.
Right.
And I think the biggest thing for me was learning my name, what my name would have been. That has been one of the most comforting and big reliefs. And I think it's weird that that's a relief, but I feel like, okay, I know that would have been me.
What would your name have been?
Rebecca Hayes.
Okay.
And my husband would go, okay, Becky. I'm like, no, I've never been a Becky, but
Right.
it fit and it was comfortable. And I have never, I know it sounds weird, but I've never been felt like I was my adopted name.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the few things I had my whole life that I just like, this isn't me. I don't know
Right.
why I didn't feel like it was me. I felt like the name never fit. That's how I got a nickname of Trish, because I was
Mm-hmm.
Patricia. And I just never felt, I feel like Patricia is like a Kennedy,
Right.
with
I
the
don't even
boats
know who Patricia is.
and on the dock and
Yeah.
rich with the wind blowing in your hair. That's Patricia. And I'm rock chick with, with paint on my shoes.
Right. Right.
But that's been good.
I it didn't strike me as much knowing what my name would have been, but I thought it was odd because my biological mother said that she always thought of me as Cheryl and I'm Sherri. So it's
Close.
very close, very close. Um, how do you think what changed in your life when you not only were an adoptee, but you were adoptive mother? Because I think a lot about our adopted mothers a lot, but I haven't adopted. So this is an experience you have in the adoption world that I don't have.
I was surprised that I went from from feeling like, oh, it'd be nice if, I knew a little bit more about them, but it's not really part of who I am,
Mhm.
to holding this less than a year old or about a year old baby and going, her mother is alive.
And you've talked about this a lot.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, done articles on it and such. But holding that baby, my baby, and being so bonded to her, I could not be closer to her if she was, my
Mhm.
DNA child.
Mhm.
But the idea that she was literally somewhere, and I was thinking, is she hurting? Does she miss her? Is she worried about her? It became real to me in a way that it was never real before. I mean, it was down to the marrow in my bones. Pain for this woman I had never ever met. And I did not think that would be the case because my daughter was abandoned.
Right.
And just thinking,
Well,
what,
because Mara was an adoption from China.
right.
Yes.
And I know that's controversial, but we're skipping over that part.
Oh, sorry. I
No,
didn't
no,
know that was
I don't mind. I don't mind. It's pretty obvious when you see a picture of her. She's
okay.
Chinese.
Okay.
But yeah, that really just made me think, oh, did our birth mothers go through this? Did they,
Yes.
do they, because you always kind of think, like most people that I know who have been adopted, wonder, does your birth mother think about you, especially on your birthday? Does she
That was
just
it
think
for me.
about me?
Yep.
Does anybody miss me? How do they
Right.
feel about me? And
But I
yes,
knew on my birthday it had to be the one day when she actually thought about me. I knew that. I thought I knew that,
I would
but
hope so. I had always hoped that at least somebody remembered that connection. And
right.
I had it bad when I got Mara, and it just changed my complete feeling of, I can't imagine ever being able to hand her to somebody else to raise. And
Right.
that had been done to me. I had been handed her to raise. And the thought of losing her was unfathomable. It still is today. I can't
And
even imagine.
your entire life shifted from corporate work to motherhood like your life, do you want to talk a minute about that? Your shift when you became a mother?
Um, my boss at the time had made sure that I was coming back and
Right.
asked me several times, "You're coming back, right? You're coming back, right?" And I'm like, "Oh, yes, I am coming back. I am a career girl. Love what I do. It's going to be wonderful." And the first year wasn't bad. My mom lived with us to help raise her. My husband worked shift work. So one of the three of us was always around, and usually two of us, whether it was days or nights or something like that. So I felt, pretty good about it. Year two, the company got bought by a company in Chicago, and they kept sending me away for, a week here, a week there, a week here, a week there. And it was getting to be almost a monthly thing. And I think I would have been able to keep doing it, but it worked out to where they wanted to move all the positions up to Chicago, and I didn't want to go to Chicago. They
Right.
sent me there in January and February, and I'm Florida. We're born without internal heaters.
And we need our flip flops. Yeah.
Woo! I thought I'll never make it, and I will never get my husband to move back up north again because he's from
Right.
Pennsylvania, Delaware, and he says he has shoveled his last bit of snow. So they were like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, well, I'll find something else. And then my husband said, look, you've always wanted to have your own business. Maybe it's time. And that was probably the best thing because Mara was very skinny and she was quite developmentally behind. And it just worked out beautifully that I could stay home then and work crazy hours. And if I had to do something at school, I could take 2 hours off and go do it.
Right.
Help foster those connections and things like that. And even today, as a 17-year-old, she's like, Mom, you're not going back to work somewhere else, right? No, hon, I'm going to stay. She goes, I like that you go to all my stuff.
Right.
And I know that's quite a privilege to have. But I also felt like with an adopted child, it made a little bit more difference than it would have otherwise because there was so much more. I mean, when she came home, she couldn't even sit up.
Right.
Year
Well,
old.
she had been in an orphanage for a year. And
Yeah.
she did have, I can't remember what you called them, but is it a mama san? Is it what did you call the ladies that she
She had
had a relation? Say
she
it
had
again.
nannies,
Nannies. Okay.
and she had two of them, and they were really wonderful. When they brought her to us, the nannies came with, and I think they were like her two main nannies.
Right.
And one of them was younger and just cried her eyes out. I felt so bad for her.
Yeah.
And the other one was a little older, and I think the one thing she did that was absolutely wonderful, and I don't know how other people feel about this with older child adoption, but I thought it was wonderful because she would take her little hand and put it on me and go, Mama, Mama, and then put it on, back and forth, hand her to me, let me hold her, get her used to me, and then hand her back. And we did that several times. So she knew it was okay to come to us,
Right.
even though we had, she was a baby, language barriers, but
Right.
it made her more comfortable. And we had read everything that we possibly could on bonding and, get it, all the things that could happen and stuff like that. And so we put a lot of effort into that as well. But
Well, and you actually wrote several books or co-wrote several books for people who were adopting internationally.
yes, my writing partner is still Kat Lamons. I have two, you and her. And she had written a book called Ladybug Love that was about Chinese adoption match stories, the day that people's stories of the day they saw their child for the first time, their picture for
Right.
the first time.
Right.
And so we reconstituted that book, rewrote it, got more stories, etc., and put that out. And we enjoyed working together so much, we kept doing it. And then we had two guides that right now are no longer available because really the Chinese adoption is no more, and Haiti adoption is pretty relatively rare, or it's mostly older children right now.
Right.
And but they were crunch time guides, so like you would get a normal travel guide, and you would look in it, you taxi, hotel, restaurant, bathroom. Well, we couldn't find one that was exclusively for the adoption language. You would need like, this is my child, she is
Right.
adopted. Does
Right.
your tummy hurt? Does your all that kind of stuff to the words you would need that you really wouldn't find in any other like quick guide. So
Right.
we did that. One of my favorite moments and memories of the whole time when these books were out were two of them. One, I found it amazing that you used the Haiti one in high school.
I was dying to tell that and thinking I wasn't going to interrupt you, but
Oh no.
yes, I teach in a high school that is 30% Haitian Creole, and I get the book that Trish and Kat wrote, and it has a pronunciation guide in there, and I use that with my students all the time. And they love to hear me mispronounce the words and teach me how to pronounce them, But it is very nice, even at that level, to walk in and say, Professeur Leco, I'm the teacher, and, the toilette, and, un, deux, trois, quatre, cinq. Like, I have those words, and I've thoroughly enjoyed having that in the classroom. Yes.
Well, we got a story from one of the Chinese adoption families a while after we'd put it out, and said she went downstairs to the White Swan Hotel, which is where most of the adopted families had to go through at one point to finalize the adoption. And the book is black on one side and orange on the back, and said it was a sea of black and orange books and people connecting with their children and able to
Wow.
do that. And I thought, this is not about money. This is not about
Right.
making money, but the idea that something, we thought of on a piece of paper, just scratched
Right.
on a piece of paper, was able to help bond those families and build those families, really put a bug in me to continue to learn more about the adoption community and to try and do things as we went along to help other authors who were trying to get messages out more specialized than just generalized adoption. And
Right.
we've done that. We've helped publish and edit several other adoption related books.
Right.
It's just been an absolute joy, and I
It's
never have thought in my
amazing.
life.
Yeah, it's amazing how I never even thought about being adopted most of growing up, and then how important it has become, and how far you've taken this in your life, and, adopted your own daughter and written the books, and then we wrote the book, and now we're doing the podcast, and how many people that this impacts. And I can't wait to hear from our listeners, and have them join in on our conversations. I think in the next episode, we're going to interview my biological mother.
Oh, I
She's one
hope
of the people that said yes. Um, so that's very exciting. But today for this, I think we're running out of time. So thank you for joining in on this episode of Found with Trish and Sherri, the podcast. Please like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you have a related story that you'd like to share or be part of our conversation, please send us an email at foundwithtrishandsherri@gmail.com. You could be part of an upcoming episode. If you'd like to learn more about the story that inspired this podcast, it is called Found Adopted Friends Search for Their Birth Families, and it's available on Amazon. You can also find us on Spotify, Apple Music, you got your prop,
Yep,
Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. So for this episode, that's it. And thank you, and we'll see you again soon.
bye.